So here, from Homeless Harvard is a powerful, emotionally gripping biological drama film, re-released in 2003, right? It, chronicles, right, the remarkable true story of Elizabeth, Liz Murray, and obviously a young woman, who overcomes unimaginable, hardship, including, poverty, parental drug addiction, right, and homelessness, to ultimately earn a place at one of the most, prestigious, right, universities, in the world, Harvard. So here the film, directed by Peter Levin, and written by obviously Ronnie Kern, is both heartbreaking and inspirational, obviously showcasing the resilience and, of the human spirit when faced with adversity, right? So here, early life and childhood struggles, right? So Liz Murray, was born in the, Bronx, New York City, into a family, riddled with, dysfunction. Both her parents, Jean Murray and Peter Finnerty, was severely addicted to drugs. Her mother, Jean, was totally, addicted to cocaine and HIV positive as well. So her father, Peter, was also drug addicted and obviously frequently unemployed as well. So despite their addictions, Liz had a deep affection of her parents, especially her mother. However, their lifestyle created an unstable and unsafe home environment, right? So here, as a child, Liz often went hungry, right? So there was a little food. There was a little food in the house, and hygiene was totally poor, right? So there was little, food in the house, right, and hygiene was poor, right? So she, recalls her and her sister, that Lisa, right, sharing one tube, one tube of toothpaste, right, as a makeshift meal, right? So their apartment was obviously filthy and neglected. Liz parents spent any money they had on drugs, and she grew up amidst squalor and neglect. At her intelligence and sharp perception of the world around her were evident from an early age, right? So her loss and homelessness at the age of 15, Lee's world took a darkness turn and a darker turn. Her mother, who had been battling AIDS related complication, passed away. Following this devastating loss, her father, totally unable to care of her, moved into a homeless shelter. Liz herself became homeless shortly after she slept on park benches, in stairwells and on friends couches, despite the dire circumstances, right? So Liz refused to let herself fall into this despair, right? So unlike many teens in similar situation, Liz didn't turn to drug or crime. She obviously internalized her mother's final words and used her pains as fuel to exchange the trajectory of her life. Her experience of losing her mother served as a obviously wake up call that pushed her to escape the cycle of poverty and addiction that had obviously blocked her family for generation, right? So turning point is what here, the turning point, education as salvation, education as salvation, right? So a pivotal moment came when Liz decided to go back to school. Though she had missed years of formal education, she obviously enrolled at an alternative high school, the humanities high school, the humanities preparatory academy in Manhattan, right, in Manhattan, with an unyielding commitment to succeed. She completed 4 years of high school in just 2 years. Okay, so all while being homeless. Her brilliance and determination didn't go unnoticed, right? So one her teachers become a mentor and recognized her potential. Liz was obviously encouraged to apply for a New York Times scholarship for obviously needy students, and despite stiff competition, she won this scholarship. Obviously opened the door for her to apply Harvard University, right? So the scholarship interview here portrayed in the film obviously was one of the most emotional and honest moments in her journey. So Lisa spoke not just for her struggles but her dreams. She didn't hide her past obviously. Instead, she embraced it as the foundation of her strength. Her raw honesty and extraordinary perseverance impressed the selection committee, right? So acceptance to Harvard and beyond. So Liz was accepted into Harvard University, a milestone that obviously symbolized not just academic achievement but the overcoming of systematic poverty, right? Social neglect and obviously personal tragedy, right? Personal tragedy is also happening there, right? So her journey from living on the streets to studying at one of the world's top institutions become a beacon of hope and emblem of human resilience, right? So here later Liz transferred briefly to Columbia University due to financial challenges, but eventually returned to complete her studies, right? Her story however didn't end with academic success. She became obviously a motivational speaker, author and advocate for youth and homeless individuals, sharing her message with peoples across the globe. So theme and messages is what here that from homeless to Harvard is more than just a survival story. It is a poignant exploration of resilience and determination, how one can rise above difficult circumstances with courage and self-belief. So the power of education, depicting here education as transformative force capable of breaking generation cycles. So family and love here, despite the pain, Lee's love for her parents remained strong, reflecting complex familiar bonds. So overcoming overcoming trauma. Lee's stories here illustrates how trauma can either break you or forge a stronger will. So impact and legacy is what here that the story of Liz Murray inspired millions when it aired on Lifetime televisions. The film's portrayal by Thoda Birch, right, as Liz Murray received here praise for its authenticity and emotional depth. So Liz later penned her obviously own memoir titles Breaking Night, a memoir, Forgiveness, a survival, and My Journey from Homeless to Harvard, which become a bestseller. So Liz's journey continues to inspire social workers, educators and youth advocates as well as individuals, right? So facing their own obviously uphill battles, she is living proof that where you come from does not define where you are going, right? So the conclusion of the point is what? The conclusion of the point is from homeless to Harvard is a stirring real life narrative of obviously transformation. Liz Murray's story teaches us that with perseverance, self-respect and obviously a strong vision for a better future, even the most insurmountable obstacles can be overcome. So her journey from the streets of New York to the hall of Harvard is not just extraordinary. It's a call to action for a society to never underestimate the potential of someone based on their circumstances. So obviously Homeless to Harvard is a poignant and deeply moving story of triumph over adversity. So here chronicling the real life journey of Elizabeth Liz Murray, a young girl born into obviously crushing poverty and chaos with rise against all odds. The carve out a better future for herself. The film offers here a raw and compelling look into Liz's life, from her troubled upbringing to her ultimate academic success. So highlighting not only her personal struggles but also her unwavering determination to change her life. So here the troubled beginning, a childhood neglect, Liz Moray, is born and obviously raised in the Bronx, right, New York City, into an environment of profound instability. So her mother, Jean Moray here, is a drug addicted. I mean to say, suffering from AIDS, and her father, Peter Finnerty, is also a drug user and mentally ill, right? So both parents are obviously unemployed and unable to provide basic necessities, leading to an upbringing marked by neglect, hunger and emotional trauma. So despite the squalor and dysfunction around her, Liz forms a close, obviously loving bond with her mother. She earns right for affection and obviously structure, even as she navigates a chaotic world of homelessness, parenting fights and her food insecurities. Liz and her sister Lisa grow up in filth, in filth, over relying on neighbors, for hangouts or going to bed hungry, right? Education takes a backseat and Liz frequently skips schools due to her unstable home life, right? So the tragedy that becomes a turning point, right? So at the age of 50, Liz suffers a devastating loss. Her mother dies from AIDS, right? A result of years of a result of years of intravenous drug use. This event shatters Liz emotionally, but also awakens something deep inside her. Watching her mother slowly fade away forced Liz to confront the harsh reality of her life. She realizes that if she does not take control of her future, she could easily and her dead or imprisoned, like so many others from her community, right? So her father, emotionally detached and obviously unable to care for her, right? So he moves into homeless shelter. Liz now completely on her own, right? So ends up living on the streets here. She sleeps on subway trains, right, in stairwells or on friends' couches. Despite her homelessness, Liz refuses obviously to give up on herself. She make obviously bold decisions. She will return to schools and rebuild her life. So determined to change the power of choice. So Liz enrolls in humanitarians, right? Liz enrolls, in humanities. Preparatory academy and alternative public high school in obviously Manhattan. Through she had missed years of school and had no stable housing, right? She approaches education with unmatched focus, right? She completely 4 years of high school, right? So coursework here in just 2 years, studying in subway station, public bathrooms and on park benches, right? So here what set Liz apart on her clarity of vision. She knows she want a different life, and she willing to work tirelessly, right? Tirelessly for it. Teachers and counselors at the school begins to take notice of her brilliance and commitment and obviously sincerity, right? One mentor in particular encourages her to apply for prestigious New York Times scholarship, granted to high achieving students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So the scholarship that changed everything, right? Despite despite fierce competition and her unconventional background, Liz delivers a deeply moving scholarship interview, in which she speaks candidly about her life, experiences her mother's death and obviously her determination to arise above her circumstances, leave profound impressions on the commitment. She is obviously awarded to the New York Times, right? And obviously college scholarship, which paves the way of her admission to Harvard University. So the moment Liz receives right the scholarship marks monumental emotional climax in the film. It is a recognition of her efforts, intellect and inner strength, and obviously validations of her belief that no past is too dark to rewrite, right? So new beginning and lasting impact, right here, that Liz is accepted into Harvard and becomes a national symbol of resilience. Her story is picked up by the social media, by the media. Her story is picked up by media, and she begins sharing her journey to inspire others, right? Though financial difficulties later forced her to obviously briefly transfer to Columbia University, she remains committed to completing her education and uses her platform to advocate for homeless and underprivileged, right? So here she eventually publishes her memoir, obviously here Baking Night, and a memoir of forgiveness, survival, and my journey from homeless to Harvard, and obviously begin working as a motivational speaker, inspiring thousands around the world with her story. So your themes and the lessons, what here, that is the story of Liz Murray is obviously testament to the resilience of the human spirit, demonstrating that one's past, right, does not determine their future. The transformative power of education here, showing how schooling, can become a pathway, out of poverty and into opportunity. So forgiveness and obviously emotional strength, Lee's ability to love her parents despite their failures, right, reflects deep emotional maturity. So personal responsibility and choice here, that highlighting how pivotal decisions, even in the worst circumstances, right, can alter the course of life. So the conclusion, the point is that that Homeless to Harvard, the Liz Murray story is not just a biographical drama. It's a story of obviously courage, hope, and the power of inner resolve, right? It illustrates how someone from the darkest of circumstances can achieve the impossible, not because they were lucky, but because they obviously refused the quiet. Liz's journey is a powerful reminder that no matter where you begin in life, your future is always your to shape, right? So this is all about that, from homeless to Harvard story of the the Liz Murray story. So yeah.